Okay, so we are on 8, lock and key. So it opens up Rabbi Chai and Rabbi Yossi. These two personify Chokmah and Bina. Rav Chaya personifies Chokmah because it's written, wisdom gives life to its possessor, and this quality of Chaya is found here. And Rav Yossi personifies Bina because the numerical value of the word Yoseh, Yud Vav Samek Yud, is Elohim, or 86. So they're walking along, and as they reach the field, Rav Chaya says to Rav Yossi, Chokmah and Bina, what you have said that Bereshis or Barashit created 6, because it is certainly so, because the supernal 6 days, that is to say, the 6 extremities of Bina, have a bearing on the Torah, which is Zohar and Pin and no more, while the others, namely the upper 3 spheros of Bina, are concealed. This too is correct. So he's hinting that created 6, or Bereshis, is 6 letters and then 6 words and then 6 days. So Bereshis is 6 letters and 6 words because what follows Bereshis is Et HaShamayim V'Et Charetz. So Bara Elokim, Et HaShamayim V'Et Charetz. These are 6 words. And what follows that are 6 days. So everything seems to be in the secret of these 6. Also, and in addition to this, on a technical level, when Zohar Pin is being formed, his Chokmah Bina Da'as is formed from the Netzach Kod Yisad of Ima. After this, her Chesed Gevur and Tiferet enters. And the same thing with the aspects and qualities of Abba. The Zohar Pin is mainly made from the 6 extremities of Bina. Or, that is to say, the creation or formation of Zohar Pin is in the secret of her lower 6. But at this time, he's saying that Zohar Pin does not have access to Chokmah Bina and Das. And the proof of this is 6 days. And the day is very important because, one, it says he called the light day. And this hints to he saw that it was a goodly child. And similarly, it's written by Elohim etor kitov, that God saw that the light was good. This goodness of the light also hints to us the secret of the child, because he saw that it was a goodly child. This is in regarding to Moshe when he's drawn out of the water. It says that the daughter of Paro, Bat Paro, saw that he was a goodly child. So the term light, which is synonymous with good, is also synonymous with the child. This is also the secret of, he called the light day. Day refers to Zohar Pin. This is even further exemplified by our sage's commentary that says evening is Esav and day is Yaakov. Again, because Yaakov personifies the Partsuf of Zohar Pin. In fact, his entire value of his name hints to this too, because Yaakov is a value 182, and 182 is 26 times 7, the name Yudke Vavke times 7, because that's the name of God that personifies the Sefera of Tiferes that Yaakov personifies, and also that Zohar Pin personifies. So he's saying the 6 days are talking about the construction of Zohar Pin. Even furthermore, the idea that on day 6 it was called man. Zohar Pin is also called man. And so because of this, he's identifying that until the construction of the 6 Sefirot, then it was called man. An example, the Partsuf called man, or Zohar Pin. And because the aspect of Chokmah Bina and Da'as are not mentioned in the terms of Bereshis, he's making an observation that indeed it says created 6, for Ima had not conceived the higher mentalities. This is also alluded to in Likutei and the Mother Sin and the Foolish King, in which it says, for Ima conceived only that which was lower than herself, being unable to conceive that which is equal to herself, and unable to conceive that which is higher to herself. And because she was the eighth Sphirot, or the power of the eighth, she could not conceive the power of the ninth, the power of the 10th. Instead, she conceived that which was lower than herself, meaning 7, right? And so 7 emerged because she is the eighth. But we have already seen in the hidden mysteries of Bereshis, where he says that he who is holy and concealed engraved a certain form in his bowels. So again, this goes back to what I revealed last night, and the conversation has shifted. So the first Paskin comes in the idea of a quick challenge, and that is, okay, Bereshis is precise because created 6, hence the Zaranpin. Zaranpin is lacking the higher mentalities. But here, the conversation switches. It says, but we have already learned that the hidden mysteries of Bereshis, which I revealed last night, regarding the Ein Sof and Ein Sof Or, which created the Rosh, the place where the Atika Kadisha had concealed himself. And where he says that he who is holy and concealed, again, this holy is the numerical value of Yud Tav, 410. And it was explained to you last night that Bereshis is Berosh, meaning in the head, was Yud Tav, or 410. That's the value of Kadosh. And how the Atika Kadisha, which was the light of the Ein Sof, entered into the skull. Because we know that the light pours into the restriction, or enters the mind, and descends through all of the heights of the mind, and differentiates itself, illuminating all aspects of the mind. Before it arose thought, from which it was written in the beginning when Israel arose thought, or the Yoshar El. And the Yoshar El is certainly the Or Yoshar, the straight lights. And it arose in thought and concealed itself in the skull, by which he concealed himself in Hu. And once the skull had emerged, and the sparks had emerged, or the kings, by which the sockets would be identifiable, meaning eyes, ears, nose, mouth, etc., light passed through, and it became illuminated. And at that time, it was identifiable. And so then it says, he who is holy and concealed, the Tikadisha, concealed and engraved. Concealed refers to the concealed Hokmah, that is to say, the restriction. And engraved refers to the heart spark. A certain form in his bowels, that means in the depth of the restriction, where the engraving of the heart spark took place, where every potential Aleph with every letter with Aleph, etc., the 231 gates, which are the engravings of potential. The secret of Bina, because it is Bina, of the Atik. Of a secret one, referring to the Atika Kadisha. And here it says the secret of the Nukva of the Atik. Now, it is explained that Adam Kadmon is the Igolin, the circular aspect, Egol, the circular aspect of the Sphirot. This is a concept that's derived in Likute. And the Malkut of Adam Kadmon is the heart spark. The idea of Malkuth, of the heart spark, or the heart spark of this restriction being the Malchus of Adam Kadmon, is Adam's first wife. Because the first Adam is the restriction, the Simsum. This is called Adam Kadmon. And at a very lofty level, a very secretive level, Likute tells us in the latter section, when discussing the secrets of Lilith, it identifies this Simsum, this womb, with Lilith. Except at this time, she would not be recognized or known by that name, Lilith. Instead, she was called Ashura, which we'll read in Bereshis B, that Ashura was the wife of Asher. What is Asher? Asher is Rosh, the head. Asher is Ehiyah, Asher, Ehiyah. And it says that we are no longer worthy of calling her Ashura anymore, and all who worship her despise her. So we no longer merit to call her Ashura anymore, because it was Asher Hay, or the Hay of Asher. That was what she was originally called. And this is the heart spark. This was the dark one, or the deep one, bathing in the river. The dark or deep one that was bathing in the river also hints to the heart spark. this hints to what it said over there in the mother, son, and the foolish king, because as the light entered in through the restriction, it did so in tree on top of tree. And the hard spark itself contained a tree on top of tree, meaning backs and fronts of the spheros. One was a white and one was black. The black one was the hard spark, from which he obtains the name Choshek, darkness, of which it was written, V'choshek kara laila. Darkness was called night. And this is, he made darkness his hiding place. Darkness, his hiding place, is Lila. If you don't believe me, in Shemos, every year during Pesach, when does Hashem come out? Go read the Hebrew. We say at midnight. But what does the Hebrew say? He came out at Lila, because he's garbed and hidden and concealed in this thing, which is a deep mystery beyond the scope of this conversation. But nonetheless, it is the first wife of Adam. And the first Adam here and the first wife refers to the Adam Katman, which is the circular aspect or the restriction. And the first wife or the receiver is the Malchus of that point, which is the hard spark. And so the Zohar is saying here that this engraved certain form in the bowels, which is the hard spark, the secret of Bina, is now saying of a secret one, the secret of the Nukva of Atik, who is designated by a thrusting point. A thrusting point because it's the hard spark, which is a point, a nikud, within the bottom of the nikudim, because the world of points, or all of these points, are all of these different chokmot, all of these different restriction levels of chokmah, which are all called points, from which Likutei tells us also it was the root of all of the various vowels called nikudim. And so the hard spark here is being called a thrusting point. This engraving, which was molded in Bina, which again is the hard spark, formed in the Bina of the Atik, was incised and hidden in it as someone who hides everything. Because inside of the hard spark, which is likened to a skull, is housed the two houses of the brain, which are likened to the back and front of the spheros. Because the backs and fronts of the spheros, a supernal pattern, was engraved inside of the hard spark, so that from one angle it perceives to be the hard spark, but in truth the hard spark houses a secret, which is the backs and fronts of the spheros. They both equate to the exact same thing, because the 231 gates can be revealed in two ways: one in a circular way, and two in a linear way. When the 231 gates are described in a linear way, they refer to the backs and fronts of the spheros. When it's viewed in a circular way, it's identified as the hard spark. And this is what it means that he placed the hard spark in the center of a circle. And this is what Sefer Yetzirah says. The circle oscillates back and forth, or the circle, and it says oscillates back and forth, it says panim ve'acher, fronts and backs. And this is also what it says, the 231 gates like a wall. A wall is a linear thing. So in one place, Sefer Yetzirah says the 231 gates were linear, and another place, the 231 gates are circular. And that's because there's a circular and linear aspect to all the spheros. The Or Yoshar is a straight aspect, and the restriction is a circular aspect. The basic principle we learn from this is that everything at the highest level is revolving, everything at the lowest level is revolving, and everything in between this and that is linear. The same thing is applied here. So regarding this hard spark, there's this circular linear aspect. And so what was incised and hidden in it was the linear aspect. And what was perceived was this hard spark, a circular aspect. As someone who hides everything, locks it up and puts the key away. Because everything is concealed inside of the 231 gates. And none had ever been able to crack it. It's called the 50th gate. In Emek HaMelech, it tells us that the 50th gate of Moshe Rabbeinu was the 231 gates. And the 231 gates is something that no person had ever penetrated. Even inside of Emek HaMelech itself, despite the fact it gives very lofty keys and explanations behind the 231 gates, the very simple tree on top of tree, the tree of the face, Neketer, the tree of the body, that's not written in a single Kabbalistic book in existence. Until Likutei emerged and revealed this thing, never had it been known. They had described the 231 gates in many different ways, but the connection between the bruised heel and the bruised head and the tree of the face Niketa, the tree of the body, had never been known or revealed. That gate, which is one of the most supernal keys because it allows you to see the divine construct within existence, meaning all the animals have a tree of the face Niketa, the tree of their body. It was explained how they're sideways and everything else in the secret of the serpent cast on his belly, etc. The same thing here in the human body. Every human being, in addition to being able to separate mem from shin, is tree on top of tree of the face Niketa, the tree of the body. And for those that are even more learned, they know that Aleph separates mem from shin in truth is the tree. And so when I say there's Aleph mem shin on your face and Aleph mem shin on your body, I'm pointing out the exact same secret. A tree of the face and a kether, the tree of the body. Because shin is, the 3 points of the shin are kether, chokmah, bina. The base of the shin is das. Aleph is chesed, gevurah, tifres. The water mem 2 points are netzach and hod. The base is yisod, and the mem sophis is malchus. So when I say that your face's Aleph separates mem from shin, I'm only pointing out there's a tree of life on your face. And when I say that your body's Aleph separates mem from shin, I'm only pointing out that there's a tree of life on your body. But the fact that you have Aleph mem shin in your face and the head in relation to Aleph mem shin of the body is tree on top of tree. It's the 231 gates. But this level had never been revealed because it's the glory of the Shekhinah. As soon as you hit that level, as soon as you begin to see the true construct of existence, you begin to beholden to the Holy One, who is called Et. This is why the Shekhinah is called Et. The Shekhinah is called Et because there's no knowing of her except for the 22 letters. There's nothing in this world that is equal to 22 letters. Nothing. This entire universe is the 22 letters in many, 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 many different ways, some of which I haven't even expounded about. But nonetheless, because of this, it hides everything. It hides everything because inside of the 231 gates is hidden the divine form, the divine pattern, from which he even called it the Olam HaMalbash. They knew to the degree that this was the garment of God, but they only understood it philosophically. That is to say that they knew that the illimitable garbed itself in information, and that the information was the garment for the illimitable, but they didn't quite understand how that was. But when you understand the tree of the face, Niketa, the tree of the body, this divine pattern which had to pre-exist the Atik itself in order for the Atik himself to emanate according to this, then you begin to see what it means. Olam HaMalbush. That is the world of the garment indeed. And it's like someone who hides everything, because everything was hidden within inside of the potential. Everything was hidden inside of the heart spark. Everything was hidden inside of thought. It locks it up because the 231 gates are inaccessible. It is called the 50th gate, from which Emek HaMelech tells us that the 50th gate was the 231 gates, and that this secret was not available to Moshe Rabbeinu, and nor did he attain or open that 50th gate, from which our sages say in many different places that Moshe Rabbeinu did not open up the 50th gate. And the 50th gate was attributed to Bina, because the Bina of the Atik is the heart spark, or the 231 gates. And so Bina is personified by the letter Nun, right? Because Lamed is the backside of Keter, Mem is the backside of Chochmah, Nun is the backside of Bina, which values 50. This is why she's called Hu, or Mem Yod, because Mem Yod, Mem is 40, Yod is 10, the value is 50. For she contains the 50 gates, and the 50th gate was through her. And puts the key away. That means that the key to understanding all of reality is to be found within inside of the 231 gates, the divine patterns, if you know how to perceive them and know their origin, construction, emanation, and emergence. But because this matter is exceedingly concealed, it's called the conceal of all concealments. None hath penetrated those levels. And therefore, for that reason, it says that the key was put away. And it is to this day. This key is kept hidden in a certain chamber. And although everything is hidden in that chamber, the most important thing is that key, which locks and unlocks everything. It's hidden in the chamber because everything is inside of the restriction. The restriction was the place where all of the worlds will come into being. And though everything is inside of that chamber, it's concealed. Meaning though all of the worlds, all of the partus, and everything else are found to be in this supernal structure, nothing is revealed about it. And without the key, meaning the understanding of the 231 gates, which is the emergence of the heart spark and understanding all of its intricacies, there's no way to understand anything because it's a key that opens up everything. Because without that, how do you know what the skull is? And how would you know that your skull has 22 bones like the heart spark as 22? How would you know that 7 kings emerged, that you should have 7 holes in your face? How would you know that the light was differentiated by 7? Or that everything is revolving at the lowest levels, or there's 22 pairs of chromosomes, or there's 22 of the mitochondrial RNA? How would you possibly know why sound is divided in between 7, etc.? None of these things would be accessible if it's not for this most supernal chamber. Everything is concealed inside of it. And the key, or the hard spark, which are the 231 gates and their explanations and how the emergence of the skull and the 2 concealed heads come into being, is required to understand the basis of wisdom, because the secrets of God are contained inside of this one thing. This is exactly why the Torah of Mashiach almost exclusively deals with this chamber. And yet the Torah of Mashiach reveals almost everything inside, anatomically, to the body, into reality. It explains why there's 7 parts to your eyes, 7 parts to your nose, 7 parts to the ears, 7 parts to the mouth, etc. Because all of these things are to be found and concealed inside of the supernal chamber when it's analyzed. One of the major problems is that when we as human beings, we make worldly use of the crown. Worldly use of the crown means that we take the secrets of God and bring them down to a human level. And in doing that, we ultimately cause the ultimate desecration. Because bread refers to the 22 letters. And what's the punishment for throwing bread on the ground? If the basic halakha of throwing a piece of bread on the ground, or so on and so forth, is so specific, the requirements halachically of what we must do in the case that bread should fall on the ground, then imagine how much more important are letters, which are bread, that should be reduced to wheat. Because bread is made from wheat. And one of the varying spellings of wheat, chet tet he, is 22. That is to say, the 22 letters. And to reduce to wheat refers to the idea that the 22 letters be reduced to physical wheat. As if God was speaking about the physical bread. We can use it as a branch and say that this is the case, but we can never usurp the 22 letters with bread. But rather we should view bread as an extension of the sacred 22 letters. But if our inclination is to care about a piece of bread to such a degree while throwing the letters onto the ground, then we're in a terrible condition in such an understanding, which cannot be. It must not be this way. Although it is, it must change. That chamber has a lot of hidden treasures, one on top of another, because that chamber has all of the treasures. It's the storehouse of the king. It's the most concealed chamber. The most concealed chamber is like the vault of the king. It's the storehouse where wisdom built her house. Well, wisdom is precise. First house is an atbash shin mem aleph, which hints to aleph mem shin. And furthermore, that house is like a supernal storehouse. Wisdom is the supernal storehouse from which all of the secrets, all the treasures of the king are to be found. One upon another means one grade after another grade, because every single process of the emanation is in a static stage. And what it means in a static state is from one level to another level, which means that even though we say that there's restriction, and then there's a hard spark, and then there's a descent, and then there's light, and then there's movement, God forbid we think that this is talking about some kind of process that is linear in some sense, because static means that every stage of its emanation retains the first stage, which means that the restriction is forever occurring. Why do you think you breathe? Why do you think everything is in a constant state of expansion and contraction? Vibration occurs through vibration and contraction. Vibration is these two things, expansion and contraction, which this occurs because of the initial simsum. Because the simsum is forever occurring in a static state in that chamber. And so is every other stage of the emanatory process, occurring in static chambers. And we should not view them as some type of linear progression as we would in something here in time that changes from one thing to another thing, and now it's a new thing and not the old thing. But in the way that the emanation occurs is that all of the old things are all static states of being, static states of laws that are being applied to reality. For this reason, Likutei states that the restriction is the secret of breath, to lend to you the idea that even though the restriction, and then we see the light and we see different things occur from it, is still occurring here in reality, because it created a static condition for emanation. And so everything that would emanate beyond that would also have this same static condition. Thus, everything has to breathe. Everything has expansion and everything has contraction. This includes the gills of a fish. This includes plants that breathe. They expand and contract. If you don't believe me, go look in the morning or go look at night and look how the plants droop. And go in the morning and watch all the plants' leaves raise up towards the sun, because they're expanding and contracting by taking in the air or taking atmospheric substance and converting it. The same thing is happening with algae and bacteria. It comes down all the way into a cellular level. When you view cellular development or cellular mitosis, you'll see the same thing happen. Expansion and contraction. So nonetheless, this is one on top of another, which teaches us everything is in static states of existence at that level. In that chamber, there are 50 gates, which is the 50th gate, the 231 gates. Because in that chamber, where Bina is, which are the 231 gates, olives to be found, which are supposed to be closed, meaning that they block the flow of lights. And indeed it does. Inside, from one perspective, it's darkness, and from one perspective, it's light. From the outside perspective, you cannot see the internal chamber. But from the inside perspective, you may see the internal chamber. It's the dimensions of the internal chamber that reveal all the deep mysteries. Because is everything revolving at the smallest level? Do you see electrons revolving around protons and neutrons? Do you see planetary orbits? Do you see everything is linear in between? And this is where the great YIRAH comes, because YIRAH means fear, trembling. What type of information even is that someone should declare, that it should be declared that everything at the lowest level is revolving, everything at the highest level is revolving, and then everything in between should be linear. And that everything that is linear is created out of revolving aspects existing within larger revolving aspects. So that we should be a linear construction, and at the smallest level of our being is all revolving aspects. And us being a linear thing existing on a larger revolving aspects, an example, a planet, revolving stars, so on and so forth. I mean, those things are so absurd. But the human mind, because of the limits of its height and the limits of its depth, and if this be the case with the mind of God, how much more so our mind, where our mind wasn't even conceived from Chachma and Bina. That is to say, like the mind of God. But our mind was created from the lower six. And so our mind is called Yisod, which is why the mental form is associated with the sphere of Yisod. And is infinitely more like defective. We have a defective mind. It's so defective that Hashem tells us, do not rely on your own understanding. And Hashem says, my ways are not your ways. And Hashem says, the thoughts of a man's heart are evil continually. Because what we do with our mind and our defectiveness and our and our defect is desecrate God. Our day-to-day thoughts are a desecration to God most times, because reality is the equal and witness and likeness to God. And how much desecration does our mind bring to reality through all of our midot and through all of our forms and spilling of seed and so on and so forth, let alone being able to contemplate anything of a divine nature. And this is the exact reason why it opened up, and he says Bereshis is the created six, and that we don't have access to Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. And yet, in the conversation shifted, and it started discussing in which there seemingly seems to be Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. But now is the key that reconciles the two. And the answer is that the lower is referring to created six, and the upper is referring to the heart spark and all the orders of emanations of the Atik. Thus, it's supposed to be closed, meaning that they block the flow of lights. There are 49 gates engraved upon the four directions of the world. That's Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, and Yisod, which are south, north, east, west. And the 49 is 7 times 7. Because again, when the light passed through the heart spark, it did so and differentiated itself in 7 kinds of light. from which there are literally 7 wavelengths, types of light waves, and from which there are also 7 lights into the spectrum. So if you pass through white light through a prism, it's going to reflect into 7 colors. And so what is the 49? It's as I've explained, the 7 sparks emerge, and when they become tikkuned by the straight light that's coming out of the face of light, the or panim from the heart spark, it gave 7 kinds of corrections to every single spark. That's why your eye has 7 parts. That's why your nose has 7 parts. That's why your ears have 7 parts. That's why your mouth has 7 parts, which is TORAH MASHIACH reveals. And these are 49 because 7 times 7 equals 49. And those are 49 gates of understanding. 49 gates from Bina. And this is precisely the reason why it says my ways are not your ways and my thoughts are not your thoughts. My thoughts are not your thoughts because the only way to understand the Holy One, blessed be He, is on His own terms, which is called supernal Torah. And not the Torah that we understand, supernal Torah, which is even transcends the Torah that we understand, because the Torah that we understand is called the Torah of words. But words don't exist without letters. And the creation of that supernal Torah is the Torah of letters. That's why the Torah begins with the letter Beit, Bereshis, because it's Torah of Beriah. And though it contained as a kalim for the Torah of Atzilus, which is the Shorosh and root of all of these matters, it doesn't have Aleph at the beginning. And they say Aleph is Atzilus, but Aleph is also Et, the 22 letters. It's also Torah Ein Sof, Torah Or, and many other different things which suffice this. Nonetheless, it is not known whether it faces one gate has no direction, which is the 50th gate, because 7 times 7 are the lower 7 sparks that receive their 7 corrections from the 7 kinds of light emerging from the hard spark, the Or Pani. And the 50th gate, which is the hard spark itself, it is not known whether it faces up or down, and this is how the gate remains closed, because we can't really know anything about the hard spark from the outside perspective. Because from the outside perspective, we can't know how it came into existence. We can't know its specifications, its emergence, its emanation, or anything. We can only know about the hard spark if we view it from the beginning and not the end. Meaning, if we're looking at it from an outside perspective, we're just seeing the face of the king. We don't know how the face of the king got there. But if you connect yourself with the Ein Sof, the endless, and should you be faithful and true and worthy, that it may be known to you, then you will know how the Ein became the Ein Sof, and how the Ein Sof became the Ein Sof Or, and then you will know the 50th gate, which is the 231 gates, which is exactly what Emek HaMelech identifies it with. Inside the gate is a lock and a tiny narrow keyhole, and the tiny narrow keyhole inside of the gate is the kings, because they're a hole that opens up inside of the gate, which means that the kings emerge out of the heart spark. And the holes that are created inside of the heart spark are likened to a keyhole in this case, which he's going to identify with Bereshit, meaning created 6. He's going to say this in just a second. This lock is marked and known only by the impression of the key, because the heart spark is only known by that which emerges from it, which created those sockets. And no one is to know about this narrow keyhole without having the key, because you could never know that the heart spark emanated out letters as kalim, and that the order of the letters as kalim are those that have the tagim. And upon this secret is based the verse, in the beginning Bereshis Elohim created bara, which again hints to the heart spark bringing forth. Bereshis is the key by which everything is hidden, as it locks and unlocks. And with this key, 6 gates are locked and unlocked. Again, this hints to the exact idea of the kings that emerge. And so when it locks those gates and includes them within itself, then it is for sure Bereshis, because bara is bina. Bara is bariah, bina. And so in bina are 6 gates, because bara, sheet, created 6. So within bina are the hard sparks. Inside of the heart spark are the sparks, the kings of Edom, which are called sparks from the workman's hammer. And they emerge. And it was said to be 6 because Nukva is included in it. The reason being is because in general 6 refers to Zeranpin. And Nukva is always considered to be a part of Zeranpin. And thus, even though it says 6, it comes to include the 7th, because it's a part of the 6. The point of saying 6 is that when it emerged, Zeranpin is separated from Nukva, and therefore 6 is precise. So when it says, so when it locks those gates and includes them in itself, then it's called for sure voracious. A revealed word that includes within it a concealed word, bara. Wherever it appears, it is a word that hides and guards a secret, implying that the key locks it up and does not unlock it. And there are many deep mysteries behind the word bara. So bara is found in every place in creation where it says created. It comes to include something very supernal. It comes to include something hidden. And bara is Berea. And it's said to be found here in Bereshit. And so again, in the tikkun that I shared with you all yesterday, which is a precursor to this portion, you saw base Rosh was the form that's shown in Likute. That is to say, the 3 circular heads, Ketach and Bina, all identified by S, and then the 7 sparks that you merge, which are Shin, Tes, Nun, Ayin, Zayin, Sadi, and Gimel. And that exact same key is applied here, and is a play off, a continuation of that. For last night's lesson, the conversation was brought up regarding the matter of the emanation of Bereshis in the skull, which is revealed in Likute. And then here, the same thing is occurring. It's a continuation of the same lesson, except at the beginning of it, there was a slight challenge. And the answer to the challenge was given as a reconciliation. That is to say, the challenge was Bereshis is created 6, so you can't have access to Hakavina and Das. And he goes, indeed it says created 6, but behold, it all emerges from Bara, it all emerges from Bina, from the heart spark. And behold, when it's united, those 6 are united with Bina, then it is called Bereshit, which implies that indeed it does include the upper, but it only includes the upper in relation to the Atik. And thus it said regarding the nukva of the Atik, the concealed of all concealments. And so when relaying the secret of the Atik, it does come to include the upper. But when we're talking about Bereshis without the upper, then it comes to include just the lower 6. And this is a very important thing, because the Torah is split up into 70 different dimensions of Sod. Sod has 70 levels, and there are different levels to the Sod. Not all Sod is the same. There is Sod, for example, that refers to Zeranpin, Sod that refers to Atik. This is one level of it. And we saw 2 explanations of Sod, because a Sod level is Bereshis refers to Zeranpin for created 6. But a much deeper Sod is Bereshis is the head of the Atik itself. For example, Barosh Yodav is the Kadosh, the holy Atika Kadisha concealed inside of the head. And that Bereshis refers to the creation of the head via base Rosh, etc. And so even though the term Sod may be applied to a variety of different things, Sod in truth just means secret meaning. But Sod has a numerical value of 70 to tell you that there are 70 screens of light or 70 different interpretations to Sod itself. Because there's a level of Bereshis that hints to the Nukva of Atzilus, for example. And this is because the word Bereshis is to be found in Rashis, the kingdom of Babylon. The first kingdom, but the word there is to be found Rashis, kingdom of Babylon. Kingdom is Malchut, and Babylon is Chokmah, which talks about the Nukva of Atzilus. And so on one level, Bereshis refers to the Nukva of Atzilus. On another level, it refers to the skull of the Atik. On another level, it refers to Zeranpin emerging. So that you should see that the Torah is used in every single grade and every single level. And it hints to the idea of what it was said, that he looked into the Torah and then created. For all the worlds and all of the universes are to be found inside of its interpretations. And so there's an interpretation of the Atik, an interpretation for Arich Pin, an interpretation for Abba, an interpretation for Ima. The interpretation for Abba is Rashis Chokmah. There's an interpretation for Ima. As we know, the Arizal says Bereshis refers to the Ima of Atzilus. There's an interpretation for Zeranpin, as we stated, created 6, and there's an interpretation for the Nukva of Atzilus, as I just stated, the first kingdom, Babylon. which all hints to this idea. In Babylon, is you are the head of gold, which is exactly the head, Berosh. And there's also a Klipothic interpretation, because Bereshis, using the 42-letter name of God interpretation, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Yud, Tav, Sadi, is the numerical value of Ashura. Like I've hinted to Ashura, from which I said that it was hinted to, but we're not worthy to call that anymore. And the reason why I say we're not worthy to call it by that anymore is because the Zohar itself, in the section called Baal and Ashura, tells us we're not worthy to call her Ashura anymore. Instead, she's called by another name, like a consolation prize. And we call it the Nukva, but Nukva is a generality. Nukva just means female. If you were to go out in public and you went up to a woman and said, hey, female, I need my order. Hey, female, pump my gas. Is that respectful? No, not at all. And that should give you a clue about how we treat the Nukva. We call the Nukva just means female. We don't even worthy of calling it a name. We use the term Lord. Lord what? Lord what? Lord is a title. Lord who? Again, we're not worthy. We call it things like what? Like ma. What? We call it land. What land? We're no longer worthy of specifics. She's completely concealed. Okay, so the main takeaways from today's lesson is to really just understand the depth of the varying dimensions of Sod, how there's a dimension of the Torah that suffices at every single level, and every single level is necessary for the overall grand schema, the overall grand understanding. For us to interpret the passages properly, we need to see how it relates to Atik, Rikaim Pin, Abahim, Zoram Pin, Nukva, and the other side. Then we need to have the reconciliation of what was said between Rav Chaya and Rav Yossi in the conversation that talks about created six. The created six is Zoran Pin, so we should see how the discussion is emerging that. But then really the true meat of the context is how it's going back to the Atik. And you can see from the very beginning of the Zohar, they're talking about a level so lofty and so explosive. It's only hinted at in breadcrumbs, even at that level, in the Idra. So we get to the Idra Zuta, the small assembly, which is the very end of the Zohar, which is what we just got through. And finally, Likutei is being shown. You can't really see Likutei plainly until you get to Idra Zuta. And then you're reading Idra Zuta, and then it's like, oh, I've seen all this stuff before. This was in Likutei. However, when you go back to the beginning of the Zohar, you all of a sudden see that they're speaking about it the entire time. And this is precisely why I said it is impossible to read the Zohar and assume that you think that you understand anything. It's not possible, because you can't understand everything from the front. This is why the nations find themselves unworthy. That means people who are in their midot, the 70 nations, are not worthy. Why? Because what did the nations say? They ask questions. That's why they didn't get the Torah. What's in it? What's this? You're not going to have instant gratification. That's not how this works. That's not how this works. The Torah isn't something for you to just conquer and be ruler over and just master and then move on from it. No, the Torah is the meaning of life. As long as you're alive, life revolves Torah. And so the Zohar is the exact same way, even more so being the Panemios of Torah. Therefore, the Zohar is not designed in a way for you to just show up there and conquer it and ravage it like some kind of warmonger, like a person who sleeps with a prostitute and then moves on to the next thing to go conquer. No. You have to chew the cud. You got to eat it during your first time, and then you have to study it many more times. This is what's the difference between a righteous and a wicked person. A righteous person and a wicked person. The wicked person studies it one time and thinks that they understand something, and the righteous person studies it 101 times, because that's called chewing the cud. Chewing the cud is re-eating the same thing over and over again. That's why Israel are likened to sheep in certain places, in the pasture of my flock. And why are they called a flock? Because a kosher animal. Because a kosher animal is chewing the cud. What are we doing? What are we doing with our entire life? We're just reading the same Torah over and over and over and over. We're chewing the same cud. We've already read this. Read it some more. Who here's 101 years old? And were you studying at 1? No, most people study at bar mitzvah. Start studying Torah. Some people before that. So you'd be 114, 115. By the time you've read it 100 times, and then it says study it 101 times, then you can be a tzaddik. Basically implying your entire life revolves around the same thing. Read it over again and over again. And that's how the Zohar begins to open up. Because when you start to see how deep it is from the beginning, you see how it's literally impossible to sit there on the first time and explain any passage in the Zohar. It's beyond the scope of explanation because it's so deep. If someone has no Kabbalah, could you imagine that? They just open up the Zohar and think they're going to read something, and then they try to understand something, and then all of a sudden you have everything to explain the entire creation of the object. All this, how do I know this? How do I know that? Just question. This is exactly why the nations rejected the Torah. Why? Because they sat there and asked God a bunch of questions. Don't ask questions. Just receive. Less chim brain, less monkey brain. Chew could. Okay, many blessings to you all. Shalom Salah.
Thank you. Shalom. Salam.
Amen.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Shalom.